Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
Let's get fired up out there, man. It's wild card weekend. I'm excited. I'm ready. It's a Friday night. Let's go, everybody. Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com here with the DFS Hustle. You've been begging us, please, guys, do more DFS talk. So here we are. We found two of the best guys in the industry to join us. Dwayne's got a family engagement. He's not with us tonight, but have no fear. We pulled in a couple of other aces in the hole from Establish the Run. It's Ryan Reynolds and Cody Mayne. Gentlemen, welcome back. We did a show a few weeks ago. Cody, you're kind of this, showdown slate czar. And when we want to talk about gambling and just some football X's and O's, Ryan is the man to talk to about that. So I'm excited, gentlemen. I'm ready to win folks some money. I'm going to build some lineups here as we go along. It's 6-game slate. We got 3 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday. Some interesting stuff. Welcome in. Cody, how are you? What are you drinking? Welcome to Wild Card Weekend.
I'm good, Drake. Thanks for having us back. Really appreciate it. We got whiskey and Coke on tap tonight. It's kind of my drink of choice. So let's have a few drinks and let's get after it.
There you go. Ryan, my friend, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Doing okay.
Excellent.
I'm living in upstate New York, so everybody up here is doing okay because the Buffalo Bills are trying to win their first playoff game since 1995. I was 15 years old when that happened, and I just turned 40 this year. So, yeah, it's been a while for the upstate New Yorkers. Bills coming in 6-point favorites, the over-under 51.5. Before we get to that, I want to talk quickly with Cody about these short slates. So you've got a ton of action, I think, that's going to be going on with the 3-game Saturday, the 3-game Sunday. You can get a little mixed 6-game action. Talk to me, and Ryan, feel free to jump in also. How are we going about building these teams? What's the mindset? Are you okay with leaving money? What are we trying to do when there isn't 15 games to choose from?
Yeah, when we talked in week 15, we kind of led off with why in DFS we're so interested in stacking, and it's something that stems from season long too. It's kind of anything with fantasy related, and where one player does well, we know that he's going to carry players with him, and the way we think about that in fantasy football and DFS is through the quarterback position most generally. There's some other mini correlation stuff we'll touch on as we go throughout the show, but in these short slates, we're still stacking. It's something that we still believe in. Something we still think is best in starting our lineups. So the difference between kind of the 3-game version and the main slates that you may be used to with the 11 games, 12 games, 13 games is that in these 3-game slates, you can really dive into how you think the game's going to play out. It's something that I'm really big on doing in showdowns. So in these 3-game slates, you can kind of go through and look and project. Do you think this game's going to go over the total? Do you think that team X is going to win or team Y is going to cover the 3-point spread? You can kind of look at these things and start building a story out in your mind of how you think the game's going to go. And from there, it's pretty easy to build a lineup. So that's kind of what we're going to try and do today. We're going to talk through these game by game and kind of decide where we think we can go as far as maybe there's some games out there that are under-owned that we can find some leverage in. So we're still stacking. We're trying to do more game script projecting than we would do in the 11 full game slates. And you mentioned it. We really got to focus on being unique. And while we talk a lot about showdown and duplicates and showdown and stuff, it's not as bad in 3-game slates. But when I say being unique, you don't want to have like a 2v2 versus the field or a 3v3 or a 1v1. You want to kind of be different enough that your whole roster construction is different and you're not playing the same 6 guys and then you've got a different tight end or a defense. You want to try and be different in ways where your whole lineup has leverage. So in that sense, you mentioned it, you can absolutely leave salary on the table. You can look at some fringier guys that you might not consider in full slates, and we'll talk about some of those guys. But yeah, leaving salary on the table is a good one, especially this first Saturday 3-gamer that we're going to talk about. It's pretty much a pick 'em. As I was going through and building some preliminary lineups, it sat pretty soft. So yeah, projecting game script, stacking, leaving salary on the table. Those are kind of the main tenets of lineup construction for me on these short game slates.
Ryan, if you're going to bet this game and there's this 51.5 over under, there's a 6-point line for the Bills, how are you going to bet this one on Saturday?
Well, for me, I think you have to look at it from a perspective of what's the range of outcomes for this game. Everyone right now is very high on Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. Everyone's very high on the Buffalo Bills defense. So I think people are I was actually surprised the total was this high. But I think there's a very real chance this game plays similar to how the Bills-Steelers game played. We have two teams both teams have very well-built rosters. Both teams are capable of putting in a real defensive effort. I don't quite view the Bills' offense as I would the Chiefs' offense, where it seems people are sort of getting a little close to comparing them at this point. Would you agree with that, Cody?
I think so. I think in terms of the DFS community, the Bills' offense is probably as loved as the Chiefs' offense might be, which seems wild, but boy, it really is.
Yeah. I'm not quite there. I had a ton of Josh Allen in season long, so it's not that I don't believe in him, but I think expecting a ceiling game out of him every week when he's basically had 3 in a row, I'm leaning more towards this game playing more similar to the Steelers-Colts game. I'll let Cody get into the receivers for Buffalo and things of that nature. One aspect of this game that I'm personally interested in is if Buffalo goes up by 10 points, what's the Colts backfield deployments going to look like, you think, Cody?
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on here because as you look at this, and if you're looking at projections around the industry or looking at anything, this game is going to be the highest owned game by far. So Ryan's point from the jump of having to take that this game might go under, that the Bills offense might underperform is really going to set you apart if you're building lineups through that manner. I think you touched on it. That if the Bills get up big, I think there are still paths for Nyheim Hines to kind of be the receiving guy, but we really haven't seen it from the Colts. Since Jonathan Taylor really took over as the lead guy, we don't have any sort of sample to go off of because we know that Jonathan Taylor was kind of rotating in with Jordan Wilkins, and we know that he was losing passing work to Nyheim Hines. But in these last couple of weeks, since like week 13, when they've been playing in these close games or they've been playing from ahead, we just haven't seen the same type of workload from Nyheim. So I don't know if they completely go away from Jonathan Taylor. If they get down 10, 14, or 21, I think they try and lean on him. I think kind of playing this game as if it goes under is really going to set you apart from the jump. If you want to play it like this game's going to hit the total or go over, or it's going to be the highest scoring game on the slate. We're going to talk about 2 games in a second here that are pretty damn ugly. But I think if you want to play it that way, then you can play it a few different ways. Obviously, Josh Allen's going to be popular. Steph Diggs is going to be popular. John Brown's back, and he's cheap. And Cole Beasley's questionable. So if Cole Beasley's out, then John Brown's going to be pretty popular, obviously. So the biggest concern is that if you're playing this game, you're just going to end up, like we talked about, you're going to end up holding hands with a large percentage of the field. And if there's a chance that this game goes under, then you're going to end up being pretty disappointed. So if you do want to play this game, just think about it in ways that you want to be unique. You basically can't afford to eat any more chalk if you're going to play Josh Allen and Steph Diggs and T.Y. Hilton and some of these guys. You can't afford to, and we'll talk about some of these running backs coming up, but you can't afford to play these popular running backs. You're going to have to get off the board elsewhere in these last 2 games. But I think another way that you can play this is if you just think Jonathan Taylor is the guy for Indianapolis and you think that they lean on him, and Ryan, maybe you think that they might have a chance to kind of put together a running game, Indianapolis that is. But since coming off the COVID list, which he was on for a week in week 12, Taylor's second in the league in explosive rush rate behind Lamar Jackson. He's handled 65% of the team's rushing attempts, 7 of 9 carries inside the 5-yard line. So I think if you want to run a Josh Allen stack, you can just bring it back with Jonathan Taylor as opposed to a pass catcher and just hope that he's the reason why they keep this game close. I don't know. What do you think, Ryan? Do you think that they've got a shot at putting together a rushing performance against this Bills defense?
I know from a game planning standpoint, if I were the Colts, that's what I would be trying to do. I'd be trying to slow this thing down. I wouldn't be conservative quite on offense, but the strength of their offense is their offensive line. So I would, especially, we're going to be outdoors in Buffalo in the middle of January. I would lean on the run game. have a little faith in the defense to not quite shut down Josh Allen or anything like that, but to slow down the 35-point, onslaughts they've been putting together recently. So yeah, I do think the Colts have a shot to cover for sure. On the other hand, I do think it's also very reasonably possible that Buffalo goes up, 31-17 and finishes off that way, So that's how I view this game. I'm from the Colts aspect, what I'll probably play is a mini correlation with one of the Bills pass catchers and one of the Colts running backs. That's probably what I'm looking at.
I like that too, and that brings up a good point, because if you're not playing Josh Allen, you can get away with doing these mini correlations with the popular guys. You can get away with it with Steph Diggs and T.Y. Hilton. So yeah, if you don't want to play Josh Allen and you think this game underperforms slightly, I think you can go that route. The mini correlation route is a good point you brought up. I think you can go Diggs and Hilton, or Diggs and Hines, or Diggs and Taylor. Just plays well, but just under expectation. One thing I did want to note, and it's going to be a consistent theme, especially for this Saturday 3-game slate, given how ugly the tight end position is. But we should at least entertain the idea of like a Allen triple stack, which might sound weird, but something that we don't normally do on main slates, especially in large field tournaments. But I was looking through box scores. Josh Allen has 5 games this season where he's thrown for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. And 3 touchdowns. So in those games, he can easily carry 3 of the Bills pass catchers with him, and they're all cheap. So Dawson Knox sounds ugly. If Cole Beasley doesn't go, then there might be some like Isaiah McKenzie love. Yeah, you could certainly get like a Steph Diggs plus John Brown plus Dawson Knox, all out, exceeding expectations. And at the tight end position, we'll touch on some guys, trust me. But at the tight end position, if you get like 6 to 9 points this week, you might be sitting pretty.
I'm no DFS guy, who's like hardcore gambling $20,000 a week on DFS. But if I'm playing this week, I'm trying to be as contrarian as possible. Maybe that's dumb, and I want you guys to talk me out of this. Everybody and their brother is going to play Josh Allen. They're going to play Steph Diggs. They're going to play Jonathan Taylor as correlation on the other side. I would say then, what if I went the other way and I go, give me Phil, give me T.Y., like, you know what I mean? Like, you got to be different. Like, let's be different then. And if you look at the quarterback position, Josh Allen, 7,500. Phil Rivers, only 5,500. We're talking about it. Everyone's like, the Bills are going to kick their ass. Okay, what if they kick their ass? Isn't Phil Rivers going to throw for 300 yards? I mean, he's got weapons out there. He's got 800 different tight ends. He's got a great pass-catching running back. Hines should be in people's lineups, I think, 4,700. I mean, Hines should get a boatload of work in this game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, my driving factor for steering away from Allen is exactly what you said. If half the field's going to play him, how I generally play 2 or 3 game slates is I do something contrarian, and I expect that I'm going to lose some weeks because of it. But overall, I have a better chance of hitting if I actually hit on something, where if Josh Allen goes off this week, you're going to have to be different somewhere else. And for me, we're going to talk about this game next, but my preference here is a mini correlation between the two sides, and I don't mind what you just said at all, where if Buffalo goes up early, especially if Buffalo's defense scores, for instance, Phillip Rivers having to come from behind trailing, stacking him up with Nyheim Hines would be interesting, because Phillip Rivers is a check down artist these days. So yeah, who would you, if you were going to stack Rivers, who would you stack him with, Cody?
Well, yeah, and to piggyback off the point that Brian made of just being unique on these type of slates, these 3-game slates, or if you're playing Showdown, the core tenet of being unique is not worrying about how often you're right, but about how much money you make when you are right. And that's the exact point. You're not going to be.
I love that. That should be on a.
Yeah, that was really good, man. It was.
You're not going to be holding hands with anybody if you're playing Phil Rivers. Honestly, I mean the quarterback slate, as we'll touch on, is very ugly behind Josh Allen, but Phil Rivers. I mean, if Goff goes, we'll touch on that game. But if Goff goes, Phil Rivers, Alex Smith, I guess, is still in the player pool, but Phil Rivers will be the second lowest on quarterback on the slate, and it's going to be like 7 to 10%, if that. If I'm stacking Phil Rivers, and maybe if I'm playing like, and to back up, generally how I play, and Ryan and I kind of play similar style, I think. We play smaller field, higher buy-in So that could be anything from like the $50 single entry, $100 single entry, or just the single entry 3 max type of games. It just kind of suits our profile better. But if I'm building more than 5 or 10 lineups on this slate, I might throw in one Phil Rivers. If I'm stacking him with anybody, it's going to be T.Y. Hilton first and foremost. Like Taylor since week 13, he's kind of just been a stud. The usage has been there. He's got a 25% target share, 40% air yard share. That really puts him in elite company. I know this is generally a difficult matchup for wide receivers, but if we expect them to get behind and for Phil Rivers to put up enough points, 300 yards plus a couple touchdowns, I think Hilton's certainly involved. You can get really, really, really weird with Pittman. He's played 80% of snaps, run around on 85% of dropbacks, and it kind of affords you the ability to be chalky elsewhere. So like if you're playing a 7% owned Phil Rivers and a 10% owned Michael Pittman, you can pretty much chalk up the rest of your lineup. You can play some Steph Diggs. You can play some of those guys. So, and then Nyheim Hines is certainly in there. Captain check down, Phil Rivers, and another captain check down we'll talk about later. But these guys really tend to target their running backs. And on PPR-specific sites like DraftKings, you can rack up a lot of points just by getting those short catches.
All right, we talked a lot about that game. Anything else you guys have on Bills Colts? No. All right, let's move it on then. Seattle and the Rams. And when we were prepping for this show, this is a game that really jumped off the page to you two. And if you listen to other guys around the industry, they're going to tell you how it's a low total. It's the lowest on the slate. It's two teams kind of that could play in a slog fest. You don't really want anything to do with them. Seattle's defense is playing better. The Rams are solid. Rams got a great corner. Blah, blah, blah. You guys see when the house on fire and you're walking towards it, you see an opportunity there. And I kind of like that because that's what we're here for, because I'm not trying to do what everybody else is doing. I'm trying to win some cash. If I'm playing DFS, I have an idea. I'm probably going to lose all this money. So if I'm going to do it, let's do it in a different way. And that's what we're talking about in this game. So, we've got Seattle -3. Like I said, 42 is the total for this one. We don't know about Jared Goff, but it looks like he's probably going to play with that total and with that line. I'm sure Vegas thinks he is. So let's get into this. Let's mix it up with what you guys think about Rams Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The line being -3 right now tells me that they think Goff's going to play.
Yeah.
Or, which I don't think is the case, or they don't think it's going to make that much of a difference if he doesn't. I don't think that's the case, but
ouch.
Yeah, right. Well, no, I mean, since he's hurt, I'm not saying that he's not a significantly better quarterback than Wolford. I'm saying since he's injured. But one thing, when people ask me who I like in a game, I'm not sure. I want to explain how I view all these things. I view everything in a range of outcomes. And when I bet on something, it's because I think something's more likely to happen than not. It's not because I think, this is exactly what's going to happen. We're betting on live, sporting events. Someone can get injured that can completely radically change how a game plays.
Mm-hmm.
This game, with a 42-point total, I think there's a greater chance than expected that this game goes over that total, just because of the components involved. For one, Russell Wilson spent the first half of the season as the MVP leader. Well, I understand that, they've been limping along for a couple of weeks, the Seattle offense, and they've stopped letting Russ cook for a while. He's still capable of, a 350-yard, 4-touchdown performance against a real defense like this one.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, if Goff plays, they're a well-coached offense. They're familiar with Seattle. They're going to absolutely bring their A game plan this week. Them breaching 20 points on their own is absolutely reasonable to me. But if they take the lead in particular, that would be wonderful for us, because as I think Cody and I are both on the same page here, we're very interested in playing Russ as the quarterback in our three slate lineup, or 3-game slate here.
Okay. And now if you do that, Russ is only going to cost you $6,700.
Yeah, looking at this game, and Ryan nailed it perfectly, and you talked about it too. We're thinking about these things within a range of outcomes, And what's the likelihood that this game is the game that ends up being the winning stack as opposed to how highly it's going to be owned? And a large percentage of the time, this game is going to play just like Vegas expects and just like everybody else expects. It's two pretty good defenses, which seems crazy to say that about the Seahawks given how they started the year, but they've been playing much better defense lately. Mm-hmm. You got the Seahawks defense who's playing better. The Rams defense we know is very good. And you have this other component that's been kind of building up for weeks with Russ not really cooking, right? You know, he started the season on fire, and Ryan mentioned it. He was probably the favorite to win MVP. He would know this better than anybody, but they've really cooled off lately. And then you have Goff coming off this injury, and no one's excited to play this game. But we know that the upside is there for these guys, whether it's Russ or whether it's DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett or Bobby Trees or Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. So, yeah, I'm excited to play all these guys. And then you have the added component that Chris Carson and Cam Akers are going to be like the two highest owned running backs on the slate. It's a really flat running back slate, as in like behind Jonathan Taylor, there's a bunch of these guys in the 5K range that are going to catch plenty of ownership. But yeah, Chris Carson's going to catch a bunch of ownership. Cam Akers is going to catch a bunch of ownership. So if you're playing it as if the passing games for each team goes off, you've got leverage because you're not playing the Colts Bills game, and you've got leverage off the other players inside this own game. Where basically if Chris Carson fails and Cam Akers fails and Russell Wilson and their passing offense succeeds, and you get somebody to come back from the Rams side, you're cooking. So I like playing it that way, and I think of the three games on this slate, this game's got the most upside relative to how highly it's going to be owned.
I agree.
Let me ask you this. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is going to play Jared Goff.
Sure, they're not.
You know, if you want to get real crazy and put it out there, what if you did a stack with Goff, Woods, Kupp, and you got after it that way? I mean, we're trying to win money here. This is the NFL playoffs. We'll see what the health is, but crazy shit happens in the NFL. Let's not act like everything we think happens is then we turn the game on tomorrow and we go, oh my God, I can't believe Jared Goff just threw for 300 yards. Even if he's losing, like they're going to throw the ball even more. It's going to be fantastic. But Jared Goff 6,000 even on DraftKings.
I thought about this as we were approaching 10 p.m. tonight. No one is going to play him. Double stacking him with those two good guys is interesting. Bringing it back with, I think I'd prefer Lockett over Metcalf in that scenario. I'm not sure I'd advise that in a single entry contest, but for 20 plus, especially if you're doing something with 150 max, I would absolutely have some Goff exposure just because of the scenario you're talking about. On top of that, something I wanted to say is Russell Wilson sometimes struggles with the Rams defense because his poison is interior pressure, and Aaron Donald is the king of interior pressure. So one of the paths I see in this game is, say the Rams come out and they play ahead. Say they're up 14-0. Russ struggles early on. They come out with their clunky, 2019 offense where they're trying to run the ball. And then they basically leave it up to Russ to come back and win it with 10 minutes left in the third quarter. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting scenario where I think Goff could hit or Wilson could hit on his end, where it's a bring back of either Kupp or Woods. I know for me, with Kupp in particular, he's a guy, if I play him, he's not going to be the right guy. I'm always wrong on Kupp. So, Cody, what are your thoughts on Kupp in particular?
I think I lean Woods. I just think he's a better receiver overall.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I think I lean Woods. I think that they're pretty comparable from like a rates perspective. Woods obviously has a higher percentage of the air yards. He's kind of getting he has a little bit of rushing up equity if you want to factor that in, though it may be like 1 or 2 touches per game. But they're like end zone targets and the red zone targets are pretty spread out. So I don't think you're getting any sort of like massive TD equity by playing Woods over Kupp. I think they're pretty even, but I just think from a talent perspective, Woods is just a little bit better. And we should go back and touch on this because people listening are probably thinking, what on earth are these guys talking about Phillip Rivers and Jared Goff when we've got Josh Allen on the slate? Like, I was looking at some of the contest sizes and some of the things you guys might be playing. There's a $3 20 max, which is a great contest to get into. You can build 20 lineups by hand. And that thing's got 297,000 entries in it. So when we're talking about this, you have to beat 297,000 other people. You want to try and be different. So unless you're going 100% Josh Allen and you're just kind of taking the all or nothing approach and you're going to find ways to be different around it, you really need to be considering some of these other plays, and it's going to feel uncomfortable until it hits. So like we touched on, you want to try and maximize how much you're winning when you're right, not how many times you're right.
Yeah. And this game can be a rock fight as is projected, especially if Goff doesn't play. I want to be very clear about that. We're not saying this game's going to go into the 60s, but I think there's more of a chance that's reality than people think.
I just looked at the weather. It's not bad. It's going to be in the mid 40s. Yeah. No rain, no precipitation. It's going to be fine up in Seattle. So,
well, if the final for this game was 30-27 Seahawks, it wouldn't really surprise me all that much.
Let's go.
You had a great point when we were talking off air, Ryan, about the wide receivers in this. And DK Metcalf, we know he's going to get matched up with Jalen Ramsey. The Rams obviously excellent against outside corners. What do you guys think about these two guys? Is there anywhere else you can go? I mean, Seattle. I mean, we touched on the tight ends also before the show. Do you want to go anywhere with those guys, or I mean, it's ugly.
I mean, for me, Metcalf is a great weapon. He's a very productive athlete. I would want him on my team without question. He's not a great route runner, and Jalen Ramsey's a comparable athlete. He's tall. You can run with him. If he plays inside leverage on Metcalf all game, they're going to have to drop in, 50-yard bombs to him essentially. So I would lean Lockett because I think there's a greater path for Lockett to seeing the volume. It's also a reason I'm semi-interested in the tight ends, although I wish we could say the Seahawks actually play a tight end more than any of the other ones on any kind of consistent basis. But for me, I would rather play Lockett than Metcalf this week because of the Ramsey component. I think that's one of the few corners in football, maybe even the only corner in football, where I actually care about who's covering Metcalf.
I'm glad you added that at the end because I mean, cornerback matchups don't matter to me.
Yeah,
so.
No, in a lot of cases they don't, especially not with guys like this.
If I asked you who was leading the Seahawks in end zone targets, who would you say?
Probably Metcalf.
It's not. I looked it up before the game to make sure it's Lockett. Lockett's got a slight edge, 16-14. And the other thing about Lockett is whether you want to call it the chemistry with Russ Wilson or the short area targets that he gets, he's got a much higher catch rate, and that's kind of been consistent throughout his career on PPR specific sites like DraftKings. Even though Metcalf's got a much higher share of the team air yards, and when he does catch balls, they're going to be further downfield, and the big body athletic receiver kind of gives you that ceiling near the goal line. It really hasn't been borne out. At least from a usage perspective, which is all I'm really concerned about. So yeah, I'm with Ryan 100%. Whereas I've joked on Twitter that models can't adjust for how much of a grown ass man DK Metcalf is. I think Lockett's probably the play here.
All right, let's go on to our third game on Saturday night. So we'll all be in a football coma at this point. You'll be a couple of drinks in. Put the wife and kids to bed. And we've got the Bucks at the football team. 8.5-point spread for Tampa Bay. Tom Brady and the boys in the nation's capital. 45 points over under on that. I've got a couple of thoughts on this. And I think, people think, Washington, they've got this defense. They can slow people down, blah, blah, blah. Washington's offense is so inept. So inept. If the Bucks get up on them 14-0, 17-0, this game's over. And I wonder if that's an opportunity there where you may be able to sneak in a Ronald Jones for some rushing equity because Tampa Bay kind of runs away from them. But I like Brady. I like the receivers. I love the outside receivers specifically. I don't like anybody in the slot. What do you guys think about this game?
I have a very similar read. I think this is a defense game, particularly for the Bucks, because you're an Eagles fan. You're very in tune with what kind of football organization they are. You know how many people they sat last week. Washington's offense was atrocious last week.
It's not in Alex Smith's contract to throw the ball more than 5 yards down the field. You don't think Tampa's going to just be sitting on all these 5-yard routes?
They're going to blitz them. Alex Smith's a real NFL quarterback, so I don't want to kill him. But yeah, he's very conservative. Tampa's going to blitz him, and he did not look healthy last week. He did not look like he had before. He missed time with his injury this year. So that's how I want to play this game. In particular, it's Ronald Jones plus the Bucs defense. From Tampa's perspective on offense, Washington does have an excellent front. I think from a game planning standpoint, you have your 43-year-old statuesque quarterback Brady. You have to keep him clean as often as possible. And in order to do that, you do quick hitters. Like you said before the show, Brian, maybe use Gronk as more of a blocking factor than normal.
Right. If you remember Gronk early in the season, everyone's like, where's Gronk? What's he doing? Was he working himself into shape? No, he was playing left tackle basically. And I think with the pass rush that the football team has, they're going to keep Gronk in, and he's going to be chipping and blocking the entire day. I wouldn't waste a nickel on Gronk in DFS this weekend.
I do legitimately think that's possible. Washington has two excellent edge rushers in Montez Sweat and Chase Young. Giving their tackles help against both of them makes a lot of sense. Short passes to Ronald Jones makes sense. LaShawn McCoy's out, so I think we're looking at Jones and some combination of Jones and Fournette. You have any read on that, Cody? What kind of role Fournette might have?
Yeah, I don't think we need to go down to Fournette. We've talked about being weird a lot already, but I don't think we need to go down to Fournette.
I think if you're at running back, you got to talk J.D. McKissic, right, Cody?
Hey, there we go. All right, thanks for setting me up. I appreciate you on that because that's the way that I want to play this. I agree with you guys. I think Tampa Bay runs away with it, and I like your take on Gronk because he's probably going to be the second highest owned tight end, if not the highest owned tight end, with Logan Thomas there. But I wrote up this Bucs football team game already for Establish the Run for the Showdown slate, so I'm intimately familiar with this. And when Washington falls behind, Scott Turner is completely abandoning the run. He's thrown on 71% of offensive plays when trailing, and that's the highest rate in the league. So you guys nailed it. Captain Checkdown Alex Smith, you're not going to get these outlier yardage totals or a bunch of touchdowns, especially against a pretty good defense. But on PPR-specific sites, you can get these double-digit target games from J.D. McKissic, especially when they fall behind early and Gibson's completely written out of the game script. So, that's very interesting to me if we play that through McKissic. However you want to play it on the Tampa Bay side, I think you can go a number of ways. I think Brady's a legitimate option. He's likely to be the second highest owned quarterback, so I think some of the other guys that we touched on at lower ownership might be better. But yeah, I love McKissic. The other thing is Tampa Bay's defense has seen the league's second most targets against the running back position this season, and only Elvin Kamara has seen more total targets than J.D. McKissic this season.
Oh, I love it.
So it's just a perfect spot. I don't think the spot for Terry McLaurin on the outside is all that great. The ownership's already there on Logan Thomas. I think he's a good raw play, but the field's already kind of there. And then they just legitimately don't have a wide receiver 2 or 3 that we're really needing to consider. So yeah, I think there's a chance that McKissic gets double-digit targets. It's certainly within his range of outcomes. I'm
just building a goofy lineup here, guys, while we're talking. You could just start with the pass-catching running backs, McKissic and Hines, 49 and 4,700 right there, and then just start rocking and rolling around it. I mean, it's so affordable, and those guys should they're going to get double-digit PPR points, no doubt.
I think McKissic's more likely to than Hines. With Hines, there's a chance that Taylor's just the guy there now. Would you agree with that, Cody?
I think so. That, like I said, that's the thing that we haven't seen yet. We haven't really seen Indianapolis have to since JT's come back from the 1 week COVID list. We haven't exactly seen the Colts fall into kind of that negative game script where they really feel pressured to throw a bunch. So we haven't really seen that type of performance from Hines. So it's tough to say. They might just revert to old ways, and Frank Reich loves rotating these guys in and out based off of hot hand stuff. But god dang, JT's been so good. I think I had a note here that he has the highest rush EPA, which is just an efficiency metric. He has the highest rush EPA of any running back since week 13. So I mean, he's just all around been a monster. He's been a volume monster. He's been actually good. So I just don't know how quickly they'll go to Hines. He'll certainly be used in passing situations, and I think that's anyway. I think that's kind of going to be a popular take, that the Bills jump out to a lead, and then then the Colts are forced to go that route. So I'd almost rather just play the JT side of that. As far as running backs go, though, from this game, this Bucs game, we should talk about Antonio Gibson. We kind of have to just be willing to accept the fact that we might be wrong with the Bucs and that they might lose. They're 8-point favorites. We think the football team's bad. They're kind of a laughable franchise. But talk about being the guy. Antonio Gibson's been the guy for the football team, at least when they're up, or at least when they're in neutral game script. Like last week, he handled 70% of the team's rushing attempts. He's handling all of the goal line work. So, if you want to play this game that it's close or that the football team pulls off an upset, which some people might want to do, then we should at least throw out Gibson as a possible play under that game script scenario.
One thing I wanted to bring up is if you're going to play Josh Allen, which is perfectly reasonable, one thing you might want to do to be different is play this game as if Washington wins it, or at least hangs in a bit of a high-scoring affair where, to me, you can't really run against Tampa. Their interior defensive line, their linebackers, that's going to be a tall order. And the truth is, you can back me up on this maybe, Cody. Apart from games against Dallas and Detroit, has Gibson really been all that productive?
No. This is like totally a volume thing.
Okay, that's absolutely fair. Against this, again, I think against this team, it actually matters just because of like the line disparities in the interior.
You're right.
I think if I'm Washington, you probably give McLaren a shot early, and Smith's capable of hitting a deep ball to a real receiver.
Is he?
Well, before his leg injury, I remember specifically him hitting Hill every now and again. But yeah, I don't know if that's still the case now. But I think if I were them, one of the first 4 plays would be a deep post or a go route to McLaren, just to be aggressive. And, treat this game as if they're playing to win it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So, Ryan,
otherwise, I agree with you. I think I like McKissick the most in this game.
Yeah. If you're playing the Bill stack, pretty chalky. What's your go-to like mini correlation from this game? Is it Godwin plus McLaurin or Godwin plus McKissick, or what are your thoughts there?
If I'm playing Allen or if we're playing our Wilson lineup.
Well, if you're going like just chalk from the start and you're playing that first game, what's the 1 p.m. game or the noon game, if you're playing that game chalk with Allen and Diggs and Brown and bringing it back with like Jonathan Taylor or Hilton, and you want to play this game like it's close, are you playing it like Godwin plus McLaurin, Godwin plus McKissick, Antonio Brown? Are you double stacked? How are you playing this game?
I would play McLaurin. I'd probably lean towards Godwin. I don't really feel great about the Tampa receivers. One of the things about having an excellent roster like they do is they have all sorts of options, Yeah. So for me in particular, I haven't been on which Tampa receiver to, play in a given week really all season for that reason.
Well, we know nobody's going to play Mike Evans because they don't know what's going on with his knee. I saw a great stat that this year Washington has allowed the second fewest fantasy points to slot receivers, but they gave up, I think, a top 15 number to outside receivers. So I think Antonio Brown could be an underowned option, I should say, this week, whereas everyone could be on Godwin, and maybe he shits the bed, and you're like, oh, wait, here's AB. And if you watch those games, he's looking AB's way, man, not just to get him a bonus, but
he is. I agree.
When he's the third option on the team, whoo.
Well, I forget which game it was exactly. Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about here at the Fantasy Football Hustle. Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com joined alongside a couple of studs from Establish the Run, Ryan Reynolds and Cody Mayne. We're talking DFS for the wild card weekend. Thanks for joining us, everybody. If you're liking the content, of course, hit that subscribe button, like the show on YouTube, leave a comment. We'll get back to you. Follow us on Twitter at FF Hustle. And let's move on now, guys, to the Sunday slate. and that's Ravens Titans. That's where we start things. Ravens 3.5-point favorites. 55 is the over-under here. Now, the Titans have beaten the Ravens twice in the last calendar year. The Ravens, though, playing exceptionally well. Lamar's on fire. Alex Smith's essentially a good clone, Ryan Tannehill. I think he has 5 rushing touchdowns over the last 2 or 3 weeks, so he's playing great. What a matchup here to start us off on Sunday. What do you guys think from this matchup?
Yeah, I know for me, we wanted to be contrarian over the highest total game in the last slate. This one, this one should be played. I don't necessarily think you have to play one of the quarterbacks, but you probably should. And I know when me and Cody, we were guessing the lines the other day, this is the only one I really got wrong. I was very surprised that the Ravens were 3.5-point road favorites. I know home field advantage doesn't really mean what it used to this year because there's no crowd. But one of the things from like a gambling perspective that I see is oftentimes when a game's going to be heavily bet, which each of these playoff games are going to be, and they make the line 3.5 or they make it 7.5, they want to encourage public betting to take the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where to me that says they're much more worried about getting rushed on the Ravens side. So I will play this game mostly, not entirely. I will mostly play this game as if the Ravens are going to win. I like Hollywood. Lamar can one-man army any defense in the league, so he's obviously a strong option in any week, particularly in this one. On the other side, I'm actually very interested in what you have to say about the Titans side, Cody.
Yeah, I'm with you on this game too. And if you're playing the 6-game slate, I think this is an interesting way to avoid the early chalk of Bills Colts and just kind of bank on this game being the game that goes well over the total. But I'm with you. I like this game because it's not an easy game to stack. It's not, at least not in the traditional sense. When we talk about game stacking, most people, at least nowadays in 2020, 2021, think, okay, I need a quarterback and I need at least one of his pass catchers and I need to bring it back with somebody on the other side. This game, you can go any number of ways. You can do a naked Lamar. You can do Lamar double stack. You can do Lamar single stack. He gets so much of his rushing production through his legs that there's just any number of ways you can play this. As far as the Titans side go, and I'm trying to pull up pricing on Corey Davis and Aj Brown as we talk here.
AJ Brown, 7,100. Corey Davis, 4,800.
Yeah, I thought Corey Davis was really cheap, which is really nice. And he's had these games, especially. I don't think he projects, at least from a point per dollar perspective, I don't think he projects all that different. Maybe even slightly better than AJ Brown. And I'm trying to pull up his rates here. As have been fairly similar to AJ Brown on the season. He's had these weeks where he's really just gone off. So you could certainly see from him one of those games where he puts up, especially if they get behind early, he puts up one of those big games that we've seen from him this year. And I know Corey Davis has gotten kind of a bad rap in the DFS community. He's failed us so many times. But yeah, just looking at the season, he's got a 22% target share. He's got a 32% air yard share at 4,800 and going to be low owned. That's certainly a guy I have interest in. So from the Titans side, that's how I see it. Now we kind of buried the lead here with the big dog though. Like I said, the game's not easy to stack up, at least from how clean it looks from a traditional sense. But really with our bringbacks, if we're stacking one side of the game, and that could be the Baltimore side, our bringbacks, we just want somebody who's got that big play upside, who can break a long run or catch a long pass. That really just speeds up the tempo of the game and makes the opposing offense feel like they really need to push the ball. Obviously, the big dog can do that. He has 48 explosive rushes this season. For reference, Dalvin Cook's at 46, JT is at 35, and Chubb's at 34. So he's really just a force. And we know that he can turn the game with one run. He's got those classic stiff arms where he puts two guys in the dirt and he goes for 50 yards. So that type of thing has the same effect on the opposing offense that a 50-yard touchdown pass does, really, right? I mean, it just makes the other offense feel like they need to push the pace. So that's certainly something I have interest in. If you want to stack up the Ravens side, you can just bring it back with big dog, But yeah, I absolutely love Corey Davis at 4,800 and AJ Brown obviously as an upside option at 7,000 too.
What do you guys think about J.K. Dobbins at 6,600? I don't think he's going to catch a whole lot of ownership. The Titans have given up the 7th most points to running backs on the 2020 season. If we're saying, hey, Baltimore wins this game and maybe, there's a pass interference in the end zone, balls at the 1, maybe Lamar doesn't run them all in. Do you think we could get something going with J.K. Dobbins at a low ownership?
What do you think about that?
Well, I was curious what you had, because at first glance on this slate, the Sunday slate is kind of different from the Saturday slate in the sense that pricing actually kind of matters.
Yeah.
Whereas like the Saturday slate's just a free for all. It's a total pick 'em. But like on this slate, you can't get Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara, who we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
And some of these guys. So at first glance, J.K. Dobbins was a guy that was kind of missing my initial cut. He's $100 cheaper than Nick Chubb, who I think I'd prefer 1-for-1. We'll talk about him later. $1,600 more than James Conner, which, that feels gross talking about James Conner, but we'll kind of touch on his spot coming up. And then you've got guys that are priced just above him, and like David Montgomery. And then obviously the two guys at the top, and Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry. So J.K. Dobbins was kind of missing my initial player pool cut, just in the sense that there's some guys priced at the position better than him. And then we'll touch on some wide receivers coming up that are just, they're grossly mispriced, if you ask me. And there's one guy that stands out in particular that we'll really have some interest in. So yeah, I love J.K. Dobbins as a guy and as a running back, but I just think he might be a little bit too expensive, even if he's going to be low owned.
My thought on him generally is, I wanted to ask you first, because for me, his usage is very important, because to me, he should be the primary ball carrier there. Lamar Jackson's primary, how do I want to frame this? The thing that makes him special is the space he creates for other players. In the running game in particular, there might not be an easier job in football than to run in Lamar Jackson's offense. So if he got primary usage, I think he's very interesting regardless of opponent,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because so last week the rushing share was split. Gus Edwards 25%, Dobbins 27%. In week 16, it was 41% Gus Edwards, that is, 30% Dobbins. The week prior, it was 39% Dobbins, 25% Edwards. So it's, they're really just jerking them around, and we're not getting like a full bell cow usage from Dobbins. And now this team runs more than any team in the league. They're the heaviest run offense in the league. So when I say 30% or 40% for a Ravens back is a lot different than even 50 or 60% from a team that's throwing more. But still, it's just not the type of bell cow usage that we're really interested in. And we know that they're going to jerk him around near the goal line. We know that he's got Lamar to compete with around the goal line. So yeah, it's tough to get excited, but maybe that's the case for him being low owned and somebody that can just run hot and do a couple touchdowns.
Right. An interesting, I'll let you comment on ownership. An interesting high upside mini correlation in this game could be Dobbins and AJ Brown, right?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, so the thing about like the Ravens game script, they just don't really get game script sensitive. So if you're expecting them to play with the lead, they're not going to play a whole lot different than they would play if they're playing from behind. It's just how they've been. They kind of lean on Lamar's legs. They take these shot plays to Hollywood and to Andrews, and obviously they've been successful in doing so. But they just don't put the pedal to the metal when they fall behind. So it makes sense. Yeah, if they're gonna be playing from a lead, they're obviously gonna be running. We know that. And if the Titans are playing from behind, they're gonna get into a more pass happy game script. So I like that. I certainly do, and it's gonna be pretty low owned. I just question how much meat's left on the bone at those price tags, I guess, would be all I would say.
Let me ask you guys about the tight end position, because we know it's going to be difficult this weekend. It's not great, but you do have Mark Andrews on this slate. He's 5,200 on DraftKings, far and away the most expensive tight end. But you have some other semi-decent options as you go through the slate for Sunday only. Cook, Hooper, Ebron, Graham, Smith, Kmet. In this game in particular, between Andrews, Jonnu Smith, any stance on either of those two guys? Are you looking to to plug them in your lineups, or would you rather go cheaper somewhere else?
I think for me, Andrews is potentially playable virtually any week, just because he has 2 touchdown upside, and that's very rare for this position.
Okay.
Like I said the last time we did this show together, though, I probably need to consult a priest about my tight end play, so I'll lean on Cody here a little bit.
No, I was just looking at the ownership on Andrews, and it seems perfectly in line with what we would expect. Now, I will say there's a few more playable options on the Sunday slate as opposed to the Saturday slate, so we'll talk about some of those guys. But I think in general, on either of these slates, we should really consider just correlating the position with the quarterback we're playing. So, yeah, if you have interest in a Lamar Jackson team, then I think correlating with Mark Andrews makes sense. I will say that maybe playing Mark Andrews as a one-off might be wrong. He's projected to push 30 to 40% ownership across some sites, and I'm pulling that from ETR. So Levitan's very good at that stuff, especially on the short slates. He kind of has a pulse on what's going on. So
shout out to Levitan taking out $20K last week.
Yeah, GPP bro, Levitan. Love to see it. Love to see it. But if he's gonna push that much ownership at a position that we know is volatile, and that we know generally doesn't score very well, I would almost just rather opt to correlate it with the quarterback that I'm playing. So, yeah, you mentioned Jonnu. I have a lot of interest in Jonnu. If I'm playing a Ryan Tannehill stack, then I think bringing it back with Jonnu. He's only 3,200 on DraftKings this week, which seems exceptionally low. He's not going to catch much ownership, and I think he's got upside. So, yeah, like I said, the salary matters a little bit, so we should be looking for savings here. There's a few guys in that 3 to 4K range that I think are playable options this week. But to kind of wrap this up in a bow as far as the tight ends in this game, Mark Andrews is just a beast. If you've got to lean on Andrews and you're finding ways to be contrarian elsewhere, 28%, 25% target share on the season, 28% air yard share used around the goal line. Lamar obviously loves throwing the ball to him. Yeah, he's great. I don't really have a bad thing to say about him.
Let's move on now to the afternoon affair, and that is Bears at Saints. 47 is the over-under here. I got to go to you, Ryan, here on this, because from a betting standpoint, the Saints are 10-point favorites. A double-digit playoff number, is that really just so juicy that you go like, man, the Bears got to cover that. They got to make a dent, or is it, or you think the Saints blow them out? You're the bettor here, not me.
No, that's a good question, because if I was in a tournament pool where I had to pick every game this week, I would take the Bears plus 10. But what you said, the Saints absolutely can blow the Saints absolutely can blow them out. One parallel that I've thought of is the Colts game when the Colts played the Bears early in the season and the Bears couldn't really move the ball. The Saints are set up similarly because they're strong in both lines. So that's a concern for me. But this is how I see this game in particular. The Saints offense isn't quite what it used to be. The Bears have an excellent red zone defense, which means they're also a defense that's very strong when they don't have to cover the whole field. The Saints haven't really been able to push the ball downfield as well as they have in the past, in part because of Drew Brees' he's over 40 years old now. He can't really let it rip as he once could. They have Thomas coming back, which should help because it will allow Sanders to play a different type of role. Roquan Smith being banged up could open up some areas in space for Kamara. If Jalen Johnson sits, that's also a potential problem because he's actually like a real player, even though he's a rookie. So on that side of the ball, I don't necessarily think the Saints are just going to steamroll the Bears defense at all. On that note, I think this game boils down to the Bears offense. And Trubisky's a player, I always say this. He's kind of misunderstood in a sense because he's not a talentless player. His problem is that he's not consistent. He does do certain things well. He's one of the more mobile quarterbacks in the league. I would say after Jackson and Murray, whoever's third in terms of rushing quarterbacks, Trubisky's at least in the conversation. So if they use him right, and if they have him run the ball proactively a little bit more, because the Bears aren't going to be able to run the ball otherwise unless it's with Trubisky against the Saints. They do have at least some chance to hang 20-plus points on New Orleans and at least make this game interesting. So my general lean, if I had to bet this game, would be that the Bears lose and cover.
Now, I think the most owned player on the Sunday slate, it's going to come down between the big dog and Alvin Kamara. And Kamara has just been a monster lately. He had that game where he scored 48 touchdowns on Christmas. If you look at what he's done, take out the games with Taysom Hill, he's averaging, a little more than 8 targets a game and 12 carries, getting some red zone work inside the 5. It's awesome. Alvin Kamara is just the dream fantasy football player. My question to you, Cody Mayne, can we get him in our lineups and work around it to make, can we be not chalky enough to win, but still have Kamara in, if that makes sense?
Yeah, you nailed it. You might have missed one guy though. We'll touch on him in a second. But let's get to Kamara. But there's going to be one guy who's going to be more owned than even Kamara, which might seem wild. But we'll touch on him in a second. Yeah, Kamara has been a beast. He's basically a wide receiver 1 in a running back's body. So we're getting running back usage, goal line usage. We're getting rushing work. He's handled 44% of the team's rushing attempts, 22% of the team's pass work, which includes those games with Taysom Hill where he wasn't getting targeted at all. But yeah, we know he's got upside for double-digit targets. We know he's a genuine threat to hit the double bonus on DraftKings. He could go 100 yards rushing, 100 yards receiving with multiple touchdowns. We saw what was a 6-touchdown game against the Vikings this year already. He's just got one of the highest ceilings and highest floors in all of fantasy. So yeah, I think he's somebody that we should be prioritizing on this slate. We just need to be mindful about the guys we're pairing around him. So yeah, if you want to play that Titans Ravens game that might end up a little chalky and you want to play Kamara, you just need to be careful about the pieces you're putting around him, so we don't have a lineup that more resembles a cash game in some of these tournaments. Mm-hmm. But the guy that I was referring to that is gonna, I think, beat Kamara in ownership is Michael Thomas.
Yeah, his price is nuts.
$6,300 on DraftKings, which is absurd, absolutely absurd. It's a simple misprice. It's just wrong. I think if he had played like in week 16 and week 17 and showed well, he'd be 75. He'd be priced like Diggs was, which would be closer to correct, but probably still light. So yeah, he's not only the highest projected play at the wide receiver position, he's one of the best overall values just because of how cheap he is. He's $100 more than Deontay Johnson. He's actually $200 cheaper than Allen Robinson. He's $700 cheaper than Aj Brown. So yeah, this guy is just going to be massive chalk, which kind of leaned into, and I wrote down I don't have a great feel for this game because I don't know how owned the stacks will be. But I think the way that people are going to stack is just going to catch too much ownership. It's going to be like Breeze plus Kamara plus Thomas, and I don't have much interest unless you guys can talk me into Emmanuel Sanders or Jared Cook, or I know you kind of were mentioning Bryant.
Let me bring this back around. Friend of the show, Graham Barfield, put this out there, and he's talking about Michael Thomas and Elvin Kamara. In the 8 games that Thomas missed this year, Kamara's been the RB1. We know that. 30.9 fantasy points a game. When Thomas played, Kamara dips to 18.7. So if Thomas is playing, could this be, hey, let's actually get off of Alvin Kamara and go somewhere else because maybe, all those checkdowns aren't going to be there?
Yeah, I like that. If we're talking about fading Kamara and getting away from 50 to 60% of the field, tell me the second guy, Ryan or Drake. Who are you interested in if you want to stack Breeze in this side of the game? Who's that second guy behind Thomas that you're interested in? Is it Jared Cook? I know you mentioned something about Jared Cook, Brian.
Jared Cook.
There you go. All right, let's go. Tell me about him.
Well, so if we look at Jared, and again, Jared Cook is no great shakes guy, but the Bears do give up the second most fantasy points on the season to tight ends at a little over 15 a game, actually almost 16 a game, 15.8. So, if you're looking for the guy to score a touchdown, right? And let's see, Jared Cook, he's 4,600. So
he's honestly probably overpriced on DraftKings, which if we're trying to win a large field tournament, might be a good thing. Honestly,
he could easily get 3x.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's got me interested in now stacking up that side of the game. Even though I think if people aren't going to Lamar, they're going to go to somebody like Breeze. If you can talk me into a sub 10% owned Jared Cook plus Thomas, and then completely fading Kamara in a lineup, then I love that, because we're getting away from 60% of the field, and we've got good reason to. If he's struggled with Michael Thomas in the lineup, then what do we have? We have Michael Thomas in the lineup. That's a good reason to get off of that. So that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
I've got a great name for if we do this show next year. It's just going to be called Fade Everyone.
Fade the good plays.
That's the direction I'm going. The path of failure for the Saints offense is
Path of Failure is the name of the show.
They kick a bunch of field goals against the next one red zone defense in the Bears. Jared Cook scores a touchdown. The Saints defense wins this game.
There you go.
Where Thomas, in general, this is not a very good matchup for him. Now, that might not matter because I think it was last year against the Vikings. Maybe it was 2 years ago. That wasn't really a very good matchup either. And in the second half, he just erupted when the Saints were down. Granted, I don't think the Saints are going to be down in this game. I just think the Bears' offense has a chance to be better than people expect by a little bit. It's a question of how many points they give up as a defense, the Bears, for me.
Who do you guys like on the Bears? I mean, obviously Montgomery's had a great second half of the season, but I don't know if that really continues this week. They've got Allen Robinson, who's always very good, but he's at the mercy of Mitch Trubisky. Anybody? Cole Kmet, Anthony Miller, anything on the Bears side?
For me, when I want to get thin, it will be with Anthony Miller, probably. Just that's just a bet on talent type of play for me. I know it's very volatile because his usage has been up and down all year. But for me, that's something I'm interested in a little bit. Montgomery, if you're going to play Montgomery, I think you want to play him as a pass catcher. That would be my advice there. And
we don't know if Darnell Mooney's going to play. So
right.
Anthony Miller could really shoot up the board here. I think he's 3,300 on DK.
Yeah. Robinson too.
That's actually valuable on this slate. Whereas, I wouldn't necessarily think we need to punt it off on Saturday. That cheap salary actually means something. I wanted to ask Ryan. You touched on Montgomery. I posted something in one of my showdown breakdowns. I think it was when they played the Packers about Montgomery kind of having the potential, at least with Cohen out, to just be a volume hog with 20 touch plus goal line upside. In the little blurb I wrote about him as a captain option, I said he was basically a fullback, and that watch the tape guys would tell me that he's got no burst and that he's a low upside running back. And since then, I think he's been the legitimate RB1. Since I wrote that, I think he's been the RB1. So I was looking at his rates, and then he's handled 70% of the team's rushing attempts. He's got a little bit of a target share to boot. I mean, he's not a target monster by any means, but 12% since week 12. Obviously, he's the goal line back. He's going to catch a little bit of ownership just because, I mean, you've got most people are going to look into playing a running back on the flex. But do you think at 6,900 Montgomery's got a ceiling in this matchup? I mean,
this is my general take on him, period. He's fine as a player. He's, calling him a fullback's a little strong, but that's also, I get it. I understand. He's never really done it for me either as a player. During his production swell, they were against bad opponents. And Trubisky, since he is a runner, he does create some opportunities for his running backs as well. My concern in this game for Montgomery as a runner is an offensive line, defensive line play. The Saints have a good defensive line. The Saints are a real run defense. The Bears do not have a good offensive line. So that's really my concern there. But yeah, I mean, does he have a ceiling? Could he catch 6 balls for 50 yards, rush for 60, and score twice? Conceivably, yeah. He could. Where I think Mitch's ceiling is more like 250 in the air, 2 touchdowns, and 1 on the ground. That's how I think, and I think that's ambitious. I want to make that very clear. But I think that's possible.
All right, you guys want to move on? Browns, Steelers?
Sure.
I'll take it.
So the Steelers, even worse than the Eagles, laid down, didn't let Big Ben play, and chose their playoff opponent. No one got upset. Ryan Clark didn't get mad on Get Up in the morning, but that's another story, as he did tweet at me as I was angry with his nonsense Monday morning.
Wait, I got it. Ryan Clark tweeted at you?
Yes. I told him what a fool he was because
this is great.
And,
that's good.
That's what happened. Hey, follow the show on Twitter at FF Hustle. I'm at Drake Fantasy. We've got at Ryan Reynolds NFL, at Mayne 7. So, get on the horn here, folks. So we got Browns at Steelers. I would say of all the teams here in the AFC, I don't think anybody is afraid of the Browns. Right now, they've got some nice pieces. Nick Chubb's awesome. We get that. And, but their coach isn't going to be there. They got COVID running through the whole squad. Like, even as inept as the Steelers have been, I think the Steelers, being 3.5-point favorites, have to just look like odds-on favorites here. Am I crazy with this, Ryan, thinking that the Steelers should roll these fools?
See, here's my problem with this, because it's 6 now, the spread, because of all the COVID stuff, where beforehand I loved Pittsburgh because I think people are a little lower than they should be on Pittsburgh now, because you have to take a few things into account. One, they had their bye pushed up to week 4 because of the Titans' COVID issues. They played, however many games in a row after that. Roethlisberger was banged up. They've had schedule shifts because of other teams that kind of preceded their 3-game flub. They actually played several reserves last week and almost beat Cleveland when Cleveland had to win to get into the playoffs last week. So I'm of the mind where if Pittsburgh handled this game 28-17, it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever, because the Browns are a good team. They're a well-coached team. They're a physical team, but I think the Steelers are better at them. They're kind of similar, but the Steelers are better than them in almost every area. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think the Steelers could completely dominate that game.
Yeah, I know that when we talked, we're kind of playing guess the lines here. We thought this one could get away from the Browns, especially given the COVID issues. As much as I want to agree with you, I think there are some routes here for like game stack potential. There's just a ton of playable guys in this game, and when I list off these names, you might agree with me, but we've got Big Ben at 6K, 6,100. James Conner, which sounds gross. Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, Deontay Johnson, Rashard Higgins, Jarvis Landry, Juju, and Claypool. I mean, there's just a ton of guys here that are on the field and they're getting work. And I think it makes for a pretty easy stack situation, because not all these guys can get ownership, right? I mean, some of these guys are going to be pretty low owned, and they're all at pretty fair price tags. I mean, James Conner, as gross as James Conner has been, he's 5K.
Yeah.
Someone's going to win a GPP knowing that last week against this same Browns team, he went 9 for 37.
Yeah, it's gross. It's really gross.
But he did get 8 targets in the game and caught 5 of them. So, hey, we're trying to be crazy here and win some cash. If you're throwing a bunch of lineups,
I think there's routes for Conner. I mean, if especially if they come out and they win, I mean, you can talk yourself into narratives that maybe he hasn't been healthy and he's starting to get healthy and they've been saving him for the playoffs and what have you. But I mean, he's handling 50-ish% of the rushing attempts. I suspect him to be pretty involved near the goal line. The price tag's still pretty cheap, but I really am kind of interested in the pass game on this side of the ball, and then we can talk about bringbacks on the Cleveland side. But Big Ben being 6,100, you have Breeze, who's 5,700, is a little bit cheaper. I think his ownership might get a little steamed. Baker's a little thin at 5,400 against the stat defense. Obviously, Mitch Trubisky. I mean, he's got rushing upside. I shouldn't laugh, but Mitch Trubisky is there at 5,300.
You can laugh at Mitch, man. You should laugh at Mitch. You got to balance us out here.
Yeah, and then Ryan Tannehill and Lamar Jackson. We know where things are going to go there. I think, at least I think, in terms of ownership. So I think Big Ben might come in a little bit under owned, even than he's projected. And it's been rough for Big Ben lately, right? We saw it in week 16 before he sat. Hopefully off of a week where he got a chance to rest, and Mason Rudolph took the reins. He went 341-3 for 28.5 DraftKings points in Week 16 against the Colts. So, he still flashed the upside that it might take to win a large field tournament. If we get 25 plus DraftKings points, we know that like from the Steelers offense, it's going to be a slow burn, right? They're like, I think I wrote it down. They're 31st in explosive play rate. Yeah. So they're not blowing the doors off of anybody. It's the horizontal air raid, if you will. But that's good because we're going to get like, double-digit targets for Deontay Johnson, potentially double-digit targets for Juju or Claypool. And then you've got Eric Ebron there who's going to be a monster in the red zone and near the goal line. So, yeah, I think if you want to get a little bit weird on this slate, you can stack up this side. And then there are a few compelling bringbacks. Whether you think it's close on the Cleveland side or you think they're trailing, I think you can go Jarvis Landry. If you think they fall behind early, I think he's priced pretty well on the slate. If you think they keep it close and they lean on their rush attack, then obviously you've got Nick Chubb there, who's handled like 60% of the rushing attempts since they've gotten back. So, what do you think, Ryan? Am I crazy for thinking that Pittsburgh Cleveland's an okay stack here?
No, I mean, if I was going to do it, I would do it from the Steelers side. It would be Big Ben plus 2 of his pass catchers, and then probably Landry, maybe Hunt.
Yeah,
coming back.
You would play it like they're just gonna not roll them, but you would play it like they're gonna get out to a sizable lead, and then Cleveland's gonna be forced into more dropbacks.
Probably they scored some points last week. I mean, geez,
yeah,
it wasn't like it was 10-6.
Right. Well, that's my concern in this game is that last week the Browns played their A game. They played to win. Pittsburgh probably didn't quite do that. They definitely didn't play everyone, and Cleveland struggled to put them away. So the idea of them coming back and winning this game after slipping past them last week, I almost think if that happens, it has to be because Roethlisberger hands it to him.
Sure.
I mean, that's generally my stance on it. But yeah, I think this game could get 27-20-ish, even 27-24-ish in that range. Or say Pittsburgh's up 27-17 with 2 minutes left, and the Browns come down and score. I think that's possible. How would you rank the Browns' bringbacks in a scenario like that?
It depends on who I want to play around them.
Sure.
Just entirely ignoring position, price, ownership. I think the number one play is obviously Landry. I would play it the same way that you're talking about. I would play it that Big Ben kind of puts it to him, and Baker's forced into a few more dropbacks. Landry's obviously kind of the guy there, but I don't hate Hollywood Higgins either. He's 4,100 on DraftKings. Higgins is actually first in the entire league in explosive play rate. 11 of his 42 receptions have gone for greater than 20 yards. So if they get into like shot play territory where they've got to like take chances to try and bring this thing back, which it's a playoff game, it's win or you're out, right? So they're not going to hold anything back. They're not going to be, if they're down, they're not going to be grinding Chubb into the ground. I hope not. I think they may. I think they may, but continue. That tilts me off the face of the earth. The thing is, like, if we play this from like a Big Ben double stack standpoint, even the options on the Pittsburgh side of the ball are extremely cheap. Deontay's 6,200. We just talked about how he's only $100 cheaper than MT. He's not going to be that owned. People are just going to opt to. They'll find the $100 to get up to Michael Thomas, and then Juju's 5,500, Claypool's 5,200. All these guys rate out as pretty good values. And then, like I said, Higgins is 4,100. So if you want to play this from like a Pitt plus Cleveland double stack and a bring back, you can try and squeeze in Kamara and a big dog or some of those guys. So I think it kind of just helps from a roster construction standpoint where it gives you a little bit more flexibility with the cheap price tags and you're getting low ownership.
Mind you, Big Ben it didn't play last week. Cleveland is the 7th most giving team to quarterbacks on the season. I'm looking back at their week 6 matchup. Ben didn't do a whole lot. 14 of 22. I believe he threw 1 touchdown, so not a great matchup or not a great contest there in week 6 for Roethlisberger. You mentioned Nick Chubb a little bit. All it really takes for Chubb there is 1 run. He's 6,700, man. He just looks like a guy that could break through the line and sort of like the big dog go for 80 yards. Let's talk Chubb and Hunt as guys. Which one do you like better? Obviously, Hunt at 4,800 gives you much, much more savings.
For me,
ahead,
I think
I'm going to pull up some rate stuff. So go ahead on who you like better from like a matchup perspective.
I would say if you think this game's going to be close, Chubb's your play. If you think Pittsburgh jumps out on him, Hunt. On Monday night when the Ravens and Browns had that shootout, Hunt basically did nothing until the second half. So if you think the game is going to go in a direction more like that, he's the guy who's going to catch checkdowns. I would probably prefer Chubb in general because I don't necessarily think the Steelers are going to be up 21-0, with 10 minutes left in the first half. I think they're going to end up covering, but I think both teams will. This game will at least be in reach for Cleveland for most of the day. Would be how I'd envision it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if you're playing that this game's close, you can certainly get away with Chubb. He's obviously the more. I think he's the more polished rusher. He's going to give you the most upside when the game's close. Cleveland's obviously a run-heavy team. They're going to prefer to run the ball when they can. So, yeah, I think if the game's close, and you mentioned I wish they would just kind of abandon it if they get behind, but I'm not sure that they will. In situation-neutral rates, they're passing on 52. So they're very balanced. They're passing on 52% of their plays. Chubb's number 9 in explosive play rate. Like I said, 34 of his rushing attempts have gone for greater than 10 yards. So he's kind of one of those guys that can bust one. Since he's gotten back from his injury, he's handled about 60% of the rushing attempts. So we can kind of look at a 60-40 split. So like Ryan mentioned, if this game stays close, he's going to get the rushing work between the 20s. And then as far as the red zone work goes, it really just matters who's on the field. We've seen that, right? We've seen where we think Chubb should be out there, but Hunt just happened to be on the field when they got near the goal line. So you really kind of just hoping you run hot, but if they fall behind, then I think Kareem's kind of clearly the guy, and I don't think he's going to catch a ton of ownership. He's got a nice enough target share that he's going to be involved as a pass catcher if they fall behind. It was kind of surprising, though. I don't know what your guys' take on this is. I saw some stuff floating around on Twitter. When all their wide receivers got ruled out because of the COVID stuff, did you expect him to play as a slot receiver, or was that kind of just out of the question for you guys?
I thought he'd see an uptick. I figured they'd play a lot of 2 tight end sets, maybe even 3.
Yeah, me too.
Not 3 tight end sets, but essentially using the Njoku as a perimeter receiver. That's the direction I thought they'd go in. But the fact that they didn't really use him in the slot at all surprised me. Yeah. Because they didn't, right? He didn't really see like a usage difference at all, right?
No, I don't have it pulled up, but I think he ran 1 slot route. And I'm just looking at like his target rates. Maybe I need to walk this take back a little bit, but like I'm just going to go week 11 on and forgive me for droning on here about numbers, but week 11, 5.6% target share, 7.4 in week 12, 9.4 in week 13, 15.6 in week 14, 10, 3 point. I mean, he really hasn't been getting all that many targets. And I don't know right offhand. I mean, have they been in that many positive game scripts? But maybe it's kind of a false prophecy here. Maybe he really isn't that kind of pass catcher that we really think. But
that swell he had, was that against the Ravens? The 15%?
That was in week 14. I don't have opponent pulled up. Was that the week 14 game?
I'll check it out. You're going to have to talk while I look this up.
So that's the thing. Like we think these things about players, and we have these ideas of these players in our mind, and we kind of have, we play talent evaluator. That's kind of what we do as fantasy players, but we really have to look at the usage and how these guys are used. So while we like to think that Kareem Hunt is the pass catching back in Cleveland, and he is, that hasn't necessarily brought with him a whole lot of targets, at least since Nick Chubb's been back. So maybe the play there, he's 4,800. Maybe the play there, if we think they fall behind, is just Higgins at 4,100, or we jump up a little bit to Landry at 5,800. I think they both project a little bit better from a raw standpoint.
Yeah.
If we're talking tight ends, and we've mentioned quite a few on the Sunday slate, the Steelers are the second best team on the season in points against to tight end. If you were thinking of sliding Austin Hooper in there, Eric Ebron on the other side. He is just total hit or miss. You're praying he catches a touchdown pass. I did want to ask you guys, though, a little bit about defenses. We haven't touched on that so far. Any defenses on the weekend, either Saturday or Sunday, that you're really into? I know, Ryan, that's kind of your deal.
Yeah, I'll talk about – I wouldn't play any of them in the first game, obviously. I think the Saints is probably the safest play. If you want to get crazy and you want to bet against Breeze, the Bears do have an elite player in every position group. They are definitely a top 5 defense from a talent perspective. That said, they are 10-point underdogs, and the Saints are a strong offensive line team, which is the sort of team that can give the Bears problems. So I'd probably steer away from that in most cases, but I would have them. I would at least consider plugging the Bears in if I was playing a number of tournaments. Steelers are a strong play. The Browns are probably a smarter play than the Bears.
Olivier Vernon not going to play, though, right? Blew out his Achilles, best pass rusher.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'd say Garrett's their best pass rusher, but yeah, Vernon's also like a real player. And again, that's more of a bet against Roethlisberger than it is anything else. And to piggyback on something Dwayne said the last time we did this show with you guys, the Steelers' offensive play calling has been a bit suspect for a while. So that's another factor where if you played Chubb in the Browns' defense, I wouldn't really try to talk you out of it.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Final thoughts here, gentlemen. Cody, we'll start with you. The 2-game slate. Any just final impressions you want to give to the audience?
Yeah, if you're playing the Saturday, Sunday slate, which I think is a much better slate, there's not as much action out there. I think we talked about it before the show started. I think the biggest tournament on the 6-gamer is a $15 entry, 100K to first tournament. I'd be pretty happy if I won 100K. So I think that's the game. That's the slate that I'm playing. And if I'm playing that slate, I'm stacking Baltimore, Tennessee, and fading Bills, Colts. There's a lot of late swap stuff in play here. So keep that in mind and kind of think through your lineups. If you don't play a Bills or Colts stack from the start, you're immediately unique. If that game fails, then you can play it pretty chalk the rest of the way, right? I mean, there's going to be so much ownership there that if it fails and the game goes way under the total, you can kind of play it however you want from there. Keep in mind that if you don't play the game and it goes off, you're going to have to try and find ways to catch up because so much of the field is going to be there. So yeah, on the first game slate, I think Ryan and I on the Saturday slate, Ryan and I are going to talk after the show, and we're probably going to build a single entry team with the Seahawks Rams game, probably on the Russ side. So that's my favorite from the Saturday slate. Seahawks Russ double stack most likely with the Robert Woods bring back, and then on the Sunday slate, if you want to get weird, consider yourself some Ben Roethlisberger double stack with Rashard Higgins or Jarvis Landry bring back. I think that's the way I'm going to play both of these slates. Try and get some leverage. What do you think, Ryan?
I'd agree there too. As the person who sent, I won't say I quite touted Mitch Trubisky, but I at least spoke about a path to upside. If I was going to not play the Ravens-Titans game as the primary stack for the second slate, I too would play a Roethlisberger stack.
I think I legitimately wrote down on my notes that if Ryan could talk me into the Bears Saints game going over and the Bears winning, that I'd play a Mitch Trubisky stack. But you waffled pretty hard, buddy. I don't think you talked me into it.
No. I mean, I think the Bears are probably going to cover, but yeah, if they do cover, if they do win this game, it's going to be in the 24-20 type fashion. It's not going to be because Mitch Trubisky, turned into Aaron Rodgers all of a sudden. I'm not trying to promote that kind of stuff here.
Cool.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was going to say one thing that I'll say, particularly on short slates like this where there's only 3 games, you can't play afraid to lose.
Yep.
If you're trying to win this tournament, you have to take risks on certain games. You have to have strong stances, and you have to let it rip. I do that. I've gotten blanked in certain weeks because of it, but I've also, made 15 times plus my money without even, hitting the top 5 in a tournament because I've had a strong stance on something that was low owned. So I would say be willing to take risks. Don't do anything insane really, but something like the Roethlisberger stack, for instance, does make sense if you want to take a shot at winning and you believe the Steelers are going to handle the Browns.
And to piggyback off of that, consider the tournaments that you're playing in. I've got the DraftKings page pulled up here. Like I said, some of the tournaments that I'm building teams for, and Ryan and I are going to build teams for. There's $100 SPY that's got 11,000 entries, 1,100 entries. That's a whole lot different than that tournament that we discussed that's got 297,000 entries. That you have to just kind of play it a whole lot differently based on the size of the field you're playing in. And also think about ownership in the entire context of your lineup. We talked about some high-owned plays that we like. We talked about some low-owned plays. You can get different. A good lineup doesn't have all 1% owned plays, or on a 3-game slate, it doesn't have all 10% owned plays. There's going to be some chalk in your lineup. You just can't play all of it. Right. So when you start building your lineup, whether you start with a game stack or a player you like, just think about the way you're building around that. If you're starting out with a game stack that's not going to be highly owned, then you can afford to play some running backs that you think might be better overall plays, but are going to be higher owned. So just like I said, just think about the tournaments you're playing, the size of the tournaments that you're playing, how many entries you need to beat, and then think about ownership and being unique in the construct of your entire lineup.
That's great information, guys. And if you want to follow these gentlemen on Twitter, Ryan is at Ryan Reynolds NFL. Cody is at CMaine7. I'm, of course, at Drake Fantasy, and the show is at FF Hustle. Man, just a great almost hour and a half of DFS content. You guys been asking for it. So good luck this wild card weekend. If you win some cash, screenshot it, send it back to us. These guys can be found at establishtherun.com. You know all the great content they're providing over there. So for Ryan Reynolds, for Cody Mayne, I am Brian Drake. Dwayne McFarland out on vacation with the family. We wish him a great weekend. And everyone else, good luck. Let's kick some ass. Let's win some dough. And if you win some cash, buy a Fantasy Football Hustle t-shirt, all right? Just help me and Dwayne out. All right, see you, folks. Never